is starting from a mountain of coal, coal used to represent more than 80% of electricity generation. That's only 15 years ago, let's say. Now it's only 65%, and it's roughly half of primary energy use in China. So it looks like it's only 20% less, but it's a huge decrease in coal consumption. But of course, there's still a lot to do, and setting that ambition certainly will require a very strong acceleration of the decarbonation of the Chinese economy. But I think it's a very serious ambition. Now, whether it can be met I think the jury is out and will be out for the next 40 years, or at least for the next 10 to 20 years. Then we'll see if the trajectory gets there. But frankly, I mean, many countries are doing similar pledges, a lot of them by 2050. So of course, given the starting position of China, it's very difficult. But on the other hand, there are many reasons why China can actually achieve that target. And if you look at the territory of China, there are huge challenges to bring water in the right areas, to plant forests and what have you. But China has a pretty good track record of planting forests to fight desertification, as an example. So that's going to continue and probably accelerate. That's one example of some things that probably China can do that.
Welcome to Hey China. We're joined today by Denis Depoux. He's the Global Managing Director at Roland Berger, joining us from Shanghai. It's great to see you again, Denis, after some 3 years.
Hi, Martina. Very happy to be with you virtually today. I think the pledge is about cutting 65% of the intensity of carbon emissions per percentage point of GDP. That's 2/3, so that's huge. How is that achieved? Well, I think it's achieved using everything. And I think that's also a big difference between China and other economies. The first thing is it's a planned economy. So when the government is planning something, they mean it. They achieve it or they don't, but at least they mean it seriously, and they're setting out the resources and the levers to achieve this. And there's also obviously a lot of discipline in the execution. And there's more discipline now than probably in the past 2 decades. So how to achieve that target? It's certainly further accelerating renewable energy power generation. But China is already the biggest one in the world, right? It has 750 gigawatts of renewable energy. That's including hydro. It's still adding a lot more every year. But still today, it's only a fraction of its electricity production. It's adding more nuclear. That is going to be challenging because, of course, the public opinion in China is looking very carefully at nuclear power and has been a bit colder, let's say, after the Fukushima accident, quite close to China. And even though the track record of Chinese nuclear power generation is excellent, safety-wise, there is concern. There is probably a need for education. Also, it's challenging to find new sites. I think the Chinese government rules out doing nuclear plants inside the country, so it has to be coastal nuclear plants like the ones that China has today. Coast is big, obviously, but finding sites in a sort of very dense and busy environment is not that easy. So nuclear is a second level.
It will be very important for China to set an example because it's not enough just to have a pledge at UN Assembly by President Xi Jinping, but as you mentioned, to really follow up with concrete actions. Also, for example, in COP26, because this very important conference has been postponed to next year now due to COVID-19. So we will want to see a much stronger China when it comes to fighting climate change.
Yeah, timing is quite good. I think we're expecting the energy side of the 14th five-year plan sometime next year, probably towards autumn of next year. So meaning that everybody now is thinking and sort of planning, modeling how this can work and how much renewable energy, how much energy saving. Energy saving has a huge potential in China because not every, most of buildings are not properly insulated. The good news is there are still a lot of new buildings being built, and they can be immediately built with the best standards, very different from, let's say, more mature economies that don't have so much construction. I think China has a territorial advantage. It can develop what we can call carbon sinks. That's basically using vegetation, new vegetation, primary forest to capture carbon and therefore offset what's left of emissions, even if you reduce it. And that's absolutely necessary. That's going to continue and probably accelerate. That's one example of some things that probably China can do that is going to be very difficult in Western Europe because it's very dense, and so there's already quite some forest. You cannot plant so many more, right? So there is a territorial advantage of China, and we expect that until the autumn of next year, the government is setting clearer targets also in terms of renewable energy production. I think people are talking about pretty much doubling the solar generation production in China, and almost doubling the wind power generation production in China. It's absolutely massive.
What is visible also is the blue skies. We do not have those air apocalypse moments that much anymore in Shanghai and Beijing. And also COVID-19 at the peak in China in springtime has really brought about, as a positive side effect, if I may say, less pollution. I read somewhere that the country's emissions have plunged by 25% during the coronavirus pandemic by June, but that since June, since the summertime, we have again seen coal-fired plants, cement, and other heavy industries going back to work. So what needs to be done is really get those heavy, dirty industries off work and start with all of these new projects, which is going to take quite a big amount of investments and time.
Yeah, it's a big debate because a lot of people now are starting to say, okay, with the pledge of China, maybe it's a good time to simply ban new coal-fired power stations. There's still probably 200 gigawatts, so that's huge. That's roughly twice the installed capacity of my country, France, in the next 5 to 10 years, right? It's not very realistic. Right, it's not very realistic because it's probably in excess of 3 million people that depend on those plants, or depends on the coal sector. The coal sector is also for chemical. It's not only for power generation, but you cannot simply write it off. And I think that's where the 5-year plan and the planned economy has one advantage.
So China has pledged to become carbon neutral by 2060. What do you make of this ambitious target?
It is certainly an ambitious target, Martina. Yet it's in a way a continuity with what has happened, and which is probably a bit less communicated elsewhere than China. China is starting from a mountain of coal. Coal used to represent more than 80% of electricity generation. That's only 15 years ago, let's say. Now it's only 65%, and it's roughly half of primary energy use in China. So it looks like it's only 20% less, but it's a huge decrease in coal consumption. Setting that ambition certainly will require a very strong acceleration of the decarbonation of the Chinese economy. But I think it's a very serious ambition. Now, whether it can be met is a jury is out and will be out for the next 40 years, or at least for the next 10 to 20 years. Given the starting position of China, it's very difficult. But on the other hand, there are many reasons why China can actually achieve that target, and And I would be, in some cases, skeptical of other countries that people are more confident with. It will take more time, but luckily, again, it has many advantages. One of the things that has been done in the last few years, as an example, is to build a lot of renewable energy capacity in the northwest of China, where there are not so many people, or even hardly any people in some areas. And so you can build massive solar plants, massive wind farms, make this energy available where it's needed. And of course, it's a lot easier to do in China because you're crossing areas where there are not so many people. One important factor is also security of supply. I think China, especially given the geopolitical tension, is very wary not to become dependent on imported Australian coal, as an example, with a lot of tension, or American shale gas, also an area for tension. The rest of Europe is trying to find a way in the so-called energy transition, but it's actually a big shock. China will probably do a real transition. So no revolution, but actually a real transition. And that transition will take time. The good news is 2060 is not tomorrow, but in the energy world, the investments are there for 40 to 60 years. So pretty much what is decided now will be a commitment until 2060. If China succeeds, it can also take the lead in some of these industries. It's already a leader in the renewable energy industry. I mean, most of the solar photovoltaic cells that are developed in the world originates from China, are manufactured in China. Wind power is a bit different, but it's true to a certain extent as well. So it can be the same for hydrogen. It can be the same for a lot of electrification of industry, etc.
And also in the car industry, exactly as you point out, the State Council, in fact, recently announced that the target is that new energy vehicles will make up 20% by 2025. That's a shorter term goal. So what do you think, will they make it? I'm sure you are witnessing many, many new energy vehicles on the roads in Shanghai every day.
Yeah, we see a lot. We see a lot more than before, that's for sure. It's heavily supported by policy. 20% by 2025 is probably quite ambitious. Our market model suggests 5 million new energy vehicle on the road by 2025, which is a bit less than this 20% target, but still a massive increase. Today it's 1 million per year, so going from 1 to 5 is basically a massive increase. What will support this is policy, so some level of subsidies, or at least incentive to buy those cars. It's also now availability of product. I think we have in China domestic new players like NIO or XPeng that are basically developing products that are, let's say, apart maybe from Tesla, that are not seen elsewhere. So expect
you, Denis, to roll in a Tesla around Shanghai anytime soon?
Well, Tesla, or maybe one of the Chinese models. NIO has been founded by an alumnus of Roland Berger, our firm. So I have a slight bias towards.
For sure.
But it's a lot of innovation. So it's not only subsidies and government support, it's a lot of innovation. And it's not only Chinese domestic producers. I think in the product plans of the JVs with Western car manufacturers, there are also a lot of electric vehicles. They will come to China, and they will certainly be quite attractive to the market. So people need to get used to electric vehicles. This is going faster here than it is in the West, but still, it takes time. The charge infrastructure is important.
Talking about the foreign companies, I recently interviewed, for example, the CEO of Daimler, Ola Källenius, and of course, China is the second biggest market for the company. They're expanding massively with their JV as well in the market for more EVs and production and so on. So it seems like there is a heat up in the competition. Do you think there is enough space for foreign players as well? Or do you think that the Chinese local companies will really win this race?
Jury's still out. I would say for the luxury segment, I think market shares there will be huge competition, but market share will not move dramatically because there is a premium image of typically Daimler, but also others. And so this will not evolve dramatically. There is certainly a challenge for the lower end segments because the Chinese car manufacturers are getting better and better. And they will come with also more modern products. So it's not only about electrification, it's also about at least partly autonomous driving, not the full autonomous driving, but let's say driving assistance. It's also about the connectivity of the car and what services can be brought to the car. The ability for foreign players to succeed in the market is of course, commanding the basics. So that's the powertrain, shifting the powertrain to electricity, battery, or plug-in hybrid. Now the competition is shifting to something quite different where there is a level playing field to start with. So that's why I'm saying jury's still out.
Is there really a level playing field, do you think, now, at least among the car manufacturers in China for European players as well? Because that is always such a big headache, right?
Well, it's a long time. It's a long-standing claim. It has improved because most of the sort of very formal restrictions, like equity caps on JVs or restrictions to access the market, etc., have been removed or are scheduled to be removed in the next now 2 years. So that level playing field will be there in due time. Of course, then, I mean, it's not always easy. This is China. So there is what the central government says, and then there are the nitty-gritty local regulations, licensing and what have you, which are sometimes very painful. So I would say level playing field is not bad in the automotive industry.
Yes. I'll be interested to see how this whole ecosystem, you know, the connectivity between smart homes, smart phones, and then, of course, the self-driving vehicles is going to work out, because one day we'll just have everything united and connected, right? And it will be one big smart ecosystem.
Yeah, well, it's getting there. I think I mean, the level of integration of the platforms here is I think a lot more convincing than what we see in the West. So of course the GAFAs are very powerful in the West, but in a way it's separate worlds. So there is the Amazon world, which you use for a growing number of things, but it's still limited. The Facebook world, the whatever world. As you know, in China, when you are on your WeChat, you can stay there for the rest of the day. It's pretty much commanding everything, and it's integrating more and more, including services that are actually produced by competitors. So that's the interesting thing. It's starting to mix, and sometimes you don't even recognize who's producing the service.
Mm-hmm. Also, from a historic perspective, I mean, the Chinese economic system and factory system has always been based on Danwei, on the unit. So everybody does just one thing all day, all night long, but it feels like the West is now much more in a block system, where we really need to break these barriers and boundaries down to better interconnect and use these ecosystems for sure.
You know, one of the things I'm observing here is that when you look at the big internet giants, the big e-commerce companies, so the digital economy, their primary purpose is not to disrupt traditional markets. It's to connect less digitized players, like small factories in the middle of nowhere, like agriculturers or farmers producing agricultural products and what have you. So B2B or B2C platform, they're connecting people. They're basically trying to make the cake bigger. So of course that's a bit easier in an economy that is still growing even in this year and will take probably 1/3 or 40% of the global growth in the next few years. So that's a lot easier to make the cake bigger when the cake is anyway getting bigger. But if you look at the GAFAs, they're more thinking, okay, how do I disrupt traditional businesses and sort of steal market share and make the client by making the client experience better. So there are a lot of benefits to this disruption, hopefully for us consumers, but generally it's an improvement. And I think that's creating that fusion of different models and that sort of a bit more open ecosystem than what we see in the West.
Denis Depoux, Global Managing Director at Roland Berger, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Martina. It's a pleasure.
And I hope it won't take too long until we see each other, not by 2060, hopefully. You can subscribe to Hey China on YouTube and all our other social media platforms. Stay tuned.